There are stories you hear once, and they fade. Then there are the ones that stay, haunting every corner of a city that's learned to keep its secrets well. In South Mia, success is currency, and weakness, the one thing you can't afford. But what happens when the line between both disappears? This is the story of a man who built his empire from nothing, and watched it crumble, not because of failure, but because of betrayal. His name was Ethan Ward, once called the face of modern resilience. Now, he's a name whispered in the corridors of power, a reminder that no one is truly untouchable. But this isn't a story about downfall. It's about the moment when everything he believed in, loyalty, love, trust, turned into the very weapon that almost destroyed him. And the question that still lingers years later: did he lose everything? Or finally see the truth for what it was? If stories like this leave you thinking long after they end, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you see trust forever. Ethan Ward wasn't born into power. He built it with his bare hands. Before the glass towers, before the boardrooms, before the awards, there was just a man, a laptop, and a borrowed desk in a damp corner of South Mia's industrial district. He didn't have much, only belief. Belief that integrity could still exist in business, that decency wasn't weakness, and that doing the right thing didn't have to cost you everything. He would soon learn how wrong he was. By 35, Ethan had become the kind of man people love to talk about, and even more love to envy. He had founded Ward Dynamics, a consultancy that helped crumbling companies rise again. To his employees, he was a leader who saw them as more than numbers. To investors, he was a symbol of rebirth, a man who turned failure into strategy. And to the public, he was proof that South Mia still had heroes. But heroes make people nervous, especially the kind who refuse to play dirty in a city that survives on corruption. At his side was Melissa Kane, his wife, former journalist, sharp, elegant, quietly powerful. She had once exposed some of South Mia's biggest scandals before leaving her newsroom career behind. Ethan used to joke that she traded headlines for home life, but truthfully, Melissa had more influence than she ever did in print. She was his mirror, and his blind spot. Then there was Lucas Grant, his business partner. Where Ethan led with vision, Lucas led with calculation. Together, they made the perfect balance, idealism and precision. Lucas had been there from the start, in the basement office, in the late nights, in the wins and the close calls. Ethan trusted him more than he trusted his own instincts. 4 years, it worked. Ward Dynamics became unstoppable, consulting for politicians, tech firms, even international agencies. It wasn't just a company, it was a movement. But every success story has a shadow. And the first sign of that shadow came quietly. It started with a leak. A client deal gone wrong. A small article in a niche business column, nothing major. Just a whisper. Ward Dynamics accused of breach in confidential agreement. Ethan brushed it off. It wasn't the first rumor, and in South Mia, rumors were currency. But this one stuck. Soon after, he noticed changes. Lucas started taking late-night calls that ended abruptly when Ethan walked in. Melissa became distant, polite, but cold. When Ethan asked if something was wrong, she smiled that calm, journalist smile that hides more than it says. Then came the audit. Anonymous tips, flagged accounts, missing funds that didn't quite make sense. Ethan blamed it on human error, a technical glitch. He refused to believe anything else, because the alternative meant the people closest to him were the ones tightening the noose. But South Mia doesn't let denial last long. One morning, while preparing for a keynote speech, Ethan received a message on his private phone. No sender. Just a file. Inside, screenshots of financial transfers. Offshore accounts. Every one of them traced to a company registered under Lucas Grant's name. And the beneficiary? Melissa Kane Ward. Ethan's world didn't fall apart that day. It folded, quietly, perfectly, like paper into fire. He didn't confront them. Not yet. He just watched. Because the worst part of betrayal isn't discovery, it's recognition. Realizing the people you die for are the ones who'd kill your name first. 4 weeks, Ethan said nothing. He showed up to meetings, smiled for cameras, signed deals, while every glance, every handshake, every word felt like part of a lie he couldn't escape. He started watching them, not out of paranoia, but out of self-preservation. Melissa, Lucas, the people who knew his passwords, his schedule, his habits. He realized how easy it would have been to build an empire off his trust. At first, he told himself it couldn't be them, that the screenshots were fake, that there had to be another explanation. But truth doesn't disappear because you wish it away. It waits, patient, silent, merciless. He began digging quietly, reviewing internal emails, requesting archived files through his assistant, pretending it was for a case study. Every thread he pulled led to another, each one darker than the last. A consultancy deal Lucas had secured 6 months earlier had mysteriously routed funds through a shell company, one Melissa had helped set up during her short sabbatical from journalism. Invoices, signatures, communication logs, all perfectly constructed, all too perfect. The deeper Ethan went, the more he realized they weren't just taking money. They were taking his credibility, slowly poisoning his reputation through forged deals, making him look negligent, distracted. Then came the press leak. An anonymous email to Southmere Business Review, detailed, accurate, personal. The story accused Ethan of falsifying client records to cover losses, and attached a copy of his private correspondence, conveniently leaked. That was when Ethan understood. They weren't just betraying him. They were replacing him. He didn't confront them, not yet. He watched. And when people watch closely enough, the masks start to slip. Melissa began working later than usual, late-night calls with old contacts. Lucas started avoiding his gaze in meetings. Every morning, Ethan would walk into the office and notice how conversations stopped the moment he entered. He wasn't paranoid. He was surrounded. Then one night, long after midnight, he decided to follow Melissa. He didn't plan it. It was instinct. She'd left the house quietly, thinking he was asleep. He watched her drive downtown, to a familiar building, the Ward Dynamics office. At that hour, only one other person could have been inside. Lucas. Ethan parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance under the soft orange haze of the city lights. When he reached the windowed corner of the office, he saw them. Not in an embrace, that would have been easier to hate. They were sitting across from each other, talking. Her head lowered, his face tense, the air between them heavy with secrets too practiced to be new. He couldn't hear their words, but he didn't need to. He saw her hand reach across the table, touch his. And in that single gesture, Ethan's entire history rewrote itself. He turned away, walked into the night, and for the first time in years, didn't go home. Instead, he drove to the edge of Southmere Bay and sat in his car until sunrise, staring at the water, thinking about how quiet the world gets when everything inside you starts breaking at once. By morning, he knew what he had to do. Ethan was a man of strategy. Emotion could ruin you. He'd always said that. So he planned. Carefully. Patiently. He spent the next month pretending. Meetings continued. Deals closed. Public smiles remained intact. But behind closed doors, he hired an independent investigator, off the books. Someone who specialized in corporate intelligence. The man's name was Cole Avery, ex-analyst, known in the city as the Cleaner. Within 2 weeks, Cole had everything Ethan needed. Bank transfers, offshore ledgers, hotel records. Every secret mapped into a timeline that painted the truth. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was architectural. Lucas and Melissa had built a new consulting firm using Ward Dynamics resources, poaching clients, duplicating contracts, slowly starving Ethan's empire from within. They called their company Novarethic, a cruel twist on everything he stood for. But the final blow wasn't financial. It was human. One evening, Cole handed Ethan a photo, one he didn't ask for. Melissa, laughing, sitting at a rooftop bar. Across from her, Lucas. Their hands intertwined. The caption, taken from security footage metadata, read, June 14th, Ward Dynamics Charity Gala Night. That was the night Ethan had given his keynote speech about trust. The same night she'd kissed him on the cheek before walking off stage. The betrayal was complete, calculated to perfection. But Ethan didn't explode. He didn't confront. He didn't seek revenge. He did what most people never think to do. He documented everything, quietly. He let them believe they had one. Because sometimes, the most powerful move isn't to strike back. It's to survive long enough to let the truth implode on its own. And that truth was coming for them. Slowly, invisibly, inevitably. Because Southmere has a way of punishing those who think they can bury what it remembers. When betrayal finally breaks, it never does it quietly. It cracks through walls, bleeds through boardrooms, and leaves echoes that don't fade, not even after the truth comes out. For Ethan Ward, the collapse began on a Thursday morning. He was preparing for a quarterly press conference, a routine update for investors. Lucas had arranged everything. Melissa, as always, would stand beside him. The cameras were already rolling when a journalist, a young woman from the Southmere Times, raised her hand. She said, "Mr. Ward, are you aware of the recent documents linking your company's accounts to Novarethic Consulting?" The room went still. Flashbulbs froze in midair. And for the first time in his life, Ethan didn't have an answer ready. Lucas shifted uncomfortably beside him. Melissa stared at the floor. The journalist continued, "Because according to the documents, Novarethic has been diverting Ward Dynamics clients, and its founders appear to include your business partner and your wife." Beat, silence. That was the moment the empire cracked. Not when the story hit the papers. Not when the investors called. But right there, in that small room, under too many lights, surrounded by too many eyes. Ethan didn't deny it. He simply said, "Next question," and walked off stage. By sunset, the news had spread everywhere. Headlines, podcasts, trending hashtags. Ward betrayed by his own. Corporate power couple under fire. The photos of him walking away from that podium became an image. The man who lost everything but refused to bow his head. Overnight, Ward Dynamics collapsed. Clients withdrew, shareholders vanished, and Lucas, his lifelong friend, held a press conference of his own. In it, he framed himself as the savior. He said Ethan had lost focus, that he was emotionally unstable, that Novarethic was created to protect investors from mismanagement. Melissa stood beside him, silent, nodding at the right moments. Ethan watched it all unfold from his apartment overlooking the bay, the same view he once used as proof that he'd made it. Now it felt like the city itself was mocking him. His phone rang constantly. Lawyers, journalists, friends pretending to check on him. He didn't answer any of them. Because there comes a point where explanations sound like begging. And Ethan Ward never begged. Within weeks, his name became synonymous with disgrace. Business schools that once quoted his leadership now dissected his downfall. They said he was too trusting, too naive, too idealistic for the modern age. It was easier to make him the fool than to admit how corruption wins in silence. Lucas and Melissa thrived in the aftermath. Their new firm, Novarethic, was everywhere. Interviews, awards, sponsorships. To the world, they were the new pioneers of transparent business. The irony burned deeper than any headline. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that Ethan had already set something in motion. Remember Cole Avery, the investigator? He hadn't just collected files. He'd documented a trail, enough evidence to expose the fraud at its roots. But Ethan didn't want revenge through chaos. He wanted precision. He wanted the truth to burn them, not through scandal, but through their own words. So he waited. 3 months later, the truth arrived, quietly, the way real justice does. A former Novarethic accountant filed an anonymous report to the Financial Conduct Bureau. Within days, investigators uncovered falsified statements, client fund misappropriation, and internal communications that traced everything back to Lucas and Melissa. They weren't just betrayers. They were criminals. The story hit the media like fire on dry wood. The same anchors who once praised them now tore them apart. The city that adored them turned cold. And the empire they built on deception collapsed faster than Ethan's ever did. When the Bureau called Ethan for a statement, he said only one thing: "I have nothing to add. The truth speaks loud enough." And then he hung up. Melissa disappeared from public life. Lucas was charged with corporate fraud and obstruction. Their faces, once symbols of power, became warnings. Billboards replaced them with new faces, new promises, the cycle unbroken. But the part people still talk about, the part that made this story echo through Southmere, was what Ethan did next. He didn't rebuild. He didn't try to reclaim what was lost. He started something different. A non-profit initiative, the Open Ledger Foundation, dedicated to helping small businesses detect internal fraud before it destroys them. No publicity, no press, no speech, Just work. Real work. And for the first time, Ethan Ward wasn't chasing victory. He was protecting others from the kind of pain that had almost destroyed him. In South Mia, they still whisper his name, not with pity, not with mockery, but with respect. Because in a city built on ambition, it's rare to find someone who walked through betrayal and didn't become it. He never remarried. Never returned to the spotlight. He once said in a rare interview, years later, "Everyone talks about revenge. But sometimes the greatest revenge is walking away without taking the poison with you." That line became his legacy, the quiet truth that outlived every headline. And so, when people talk about Ethan Ward now, they don't call him the man who lost everything. They call him the man who refused to lose himself. If this story moved you, even for a moment, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because somewhere out there, someone's living their own version of this story. And they might just need to know that walking away can be its own kind of victory.